All right, Parth, you can begin with your presentation.
Hey guys, good morning. Yes, I think it's the morning in all parts of the world. And yeah, welcome to the question and answer session for the team management report for PI EV 2022. So, firstly, I'll just start off with a short introduction of myself. And what else better to start with than a presentation, right? So, wait, yeah, can you see the screen? So, is it? Can someone? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. So, a short description about myself. Uh, I am currently based in Germany, in Berlin. I was studying and completing my master's at TU Berlin, and I work at a company called Lycon in quality management. And prior to that, I used to work at a Energy, which is also a collaborator and partner of Formula Bharat and PI as well, I believe. And so I used to work on the development of the Ather 450X scooter that you guys, uh, I'm sure, know about. And before that, I did my bachelor's from the KGSMI College of Engineering. And I was a part of the Formula student team out there for around 3 years. And yes, well, the team leader for the team called Oran Racing India, and we won the national competition as well. So in overall, I've had around 4.5 to 5 years of experience with Formula student teams. As a part of them, as managing them, playing support roles as well, and then around 2.5 years of work experience in the industry as well. And my association with Formula One is pretty much since the time I graduated out of my bachelor's. So I started off with just helping with the Formula Bharat event in 2019 mainly, with just sponsorships, then moved on to reviewing documents in 2022. I was able to be there at the competition as well and help around, as you can see on the image on the left, just cutting some grass out there so that, you guys can drive the cars properly. Uh, with respect to the FSEV and the Pi EV challenge, so I've been a judge at the previously called FSEV concept challenge since 2019. So judging procurement and then team management. And since 2021, I've been leading the team management judging for FSEV. And now we rebranded it to Pi EV. So, but yeah, it's still the same concept. So I'll be leading that for this year as well with a group of very amazing judges. So that's a very short introduction about myself. And now, Crystal, we can go ahead with the questions that the participants had, and you can yeah shoot them at me, and I'll start answering in the best possible way.
Sure. All right. So the first question for you is, should the project timeline be designed for the build of the vehicle or for the drivetrain design?
Okay. So the best idea for the project timeline would be since the inception of the idea to start with your electric vehicle up to the date when you want to be at the competition. The question would be, why are we asking for a timeline just to say the past months where you've been working only on the powertrain, but also until the competition is so that you can get a feedback from the judges on how realistic your timeline is, so that the objective of this competition is to prepare you for Formula Bar 2024, 2023, right? So if you present us a timeline that is still the date you want to be at the competition, it makes much more sense for us to give you a better feedback on how realistic it is, or probably what changes you should make so that you can hit your goal. Or if you're not going to hit your goal, then when is it exactly expected that you can do? So based on your current status, based on your plan, we can give you feedback also on how successfully can you how of course, it's one person's view after all, but we can also give you feedback on what's the success potential of the plan that you're putting forward to, say, hit 2024 at Formula Bharat or 2023 at Formula Bharat. So it's much preferred that you give us a timeline for the entire period. Yeah.
All right. Uh, the next question is, how much information is expected for each section or subsection of reports?
Okay. So we have around eight, I guess, pre main headings, right? So main categories, and you have 10 pages of the report. So you can consider that they are approximately given the same weightage, and then you can split it across and distribute it on how much you want to present for what. And also, yeah, it's basically totally up to you guys on how many pages do you want to give to each of these topics and how you want to present it, right? Some things might take lesser space because you can always use infographics to present the entire thing, like just present the team's management team structure, for example, with one flow chart or one organigram, and you don't really need to write a lot of text below it, right? So one, yeah, flow chart can explain the entire topic, and then of course you can add more information in the appendix if you think that you fell short of space in the 10 pages that were given. But try to keep the appendix as short as possible as well, right? Because if you make a 10-page report with a 75-page appendix, which has happened in the past, you cannot expect a judge to review everything, all the 85 pages. Secondly, to give you feedback and ask questions in the 15 minutes that we get during the Q&A, that is 10 minutes of queries and clarification, and 5 minutes of feedback. It's not really possible to say suppress everything into 10 minutes, right? 85 pages of review in 10 minutes. It's pretty much difficult as well for us to give you proper feedback. Of course, the written feedback you get would be much more detailed, but it's best to have a good discussion rather than just getting written feedback. So it's totally dependent on you guys. I wouldn't want to give away an answer, to be honest, because I want you all to take the decision on how you all want to present the report, because there has to be some uniqueness in every report. If I give an outright answer, then I think every report I receive will be the same.
Thanks,
So
Parth.
yeah.
Uh, the next question, I suppose, is what should we plan for the success criteria?
Okay. So,
Uh,
success criteria is, of course, relevant to every single team, and I can talk through my experience, and that would be the best way to put it forward, right? So, I work with uh, three teams back 3 years, not three the same team, but three different, say, seasons back in India, and the success criteria for each team was very different. So, the first time I worked, the success criteria for that team was reliability, right? So, it was completion of events at the competition rather than just competing at those. So that team was fine with probably being the 10th slowest team at Formula Student in Germany, but wanted to complete the endurance. So that was the goal with which that team worked with. So that was their success criteria. And the other team that I worked with was wanted, or the team that when I was leading at that time, we set a different success criteria. We didn't really care about completing the endurance at the international events. All we cared about was to be in the top five of autocross uh, at any given competition that we were at, right? Because we had a different way to measure it out, that if you're at in the top five at different event, like the dynamics, then even if you don't complete endurance, you can be in the top 10 of the competition. So that's how your goals and your success criteria can vary. And then there was one point at which we started our own EV team as well in parallel, and the objective for that vehicle was completely different. It was just a clear technical inspection at its first international competition, irrespective of whatever the output would have been in dynamics. So success criteria is very relevant on where the team is based, where the team wants to work. And for me, another example I would give was it changed totally when I joined the team at the University of Berlin. right? Because this team was in the top leagues, and their success criteria was to be in the top five at every competition we go to. And one weird success criteria that we had was we want to be in the top three at every event we went to in skid pad. So it depends on what you're designing your vehicle for. It depends on where do you want to see yourself at the competition. And a very simple workflow for that would be start with your season goals. So basically your competition goals. So derive your goals from your competition, where you want to be at the end of the competition, say in the top five, first place, top 10, top 20, wherever. And then from that, work backwards, that, okay, if I want to be in the top 10, I need to be at, in the top 10 for every single dynamic event and the top five for every static. If I need to be in the top 10 for every dynamic event, then I need to have 5.2 seconds in skate pad, 4.5 in acceleration. You check the scores and the results from the previous year, and you get to know, okay, I need to do at Germany an autocross of 70 seconds. Then you work from that, okay, if I need to do that, I need, say, a CL/CD ratio of something for aerodynamics. I need at least a 45 to 50 HP engine. I need a 180 kilo car. I need wings on my vehicle. I need XYZ type of suspension, etc. So then you work towards, okay, the KPIs that you have for your vehicle. And then lastly, then you work with systems like, okay, now I want to achieve a 180 kilo car. So is that possible with a space frame or a monocoque? Is that possible with using uprights or wheelhouse made of steel or aluminium? Should I go for carbon fiber or should I go for glass fiber? So then you come down to the lowest level, where is component based success criteria. Okay, that I decided that my wheel assembly should not weigh more than 11 kilos per wheel, putting all of it together. So the wheel, the rim plus tire, everything, right? So then you have the success criteria for that small component. And of course, I don't expect you to have all of this information right away, but it's nice to show it in a way that you have knowledge of it and you've taken consideration as well on how to define a success criteria. So yeah, that's generally how a team should actually work on defining success criteria. How you present that is up to you. But yeah, that's how I would suggest, irrespective of the report, like whatever you do in the report, you do in the report. But I would suggest that you look at your goals and your success criteria from this perspective, say henceforth, and for all the competitions that you plan to go to in the future. So yeah, Crystal,
All right.
the next
Uh,
question.
yes. Thanks, Parth. The next question for you is, what does human resource section of the rubric entail? Please elaborate.
Okay, just a second. Yeah. So I think the rule book also gives a few of the topics that we want to have a look at probably during the human resource things, such as the recruitment, the retention, the change management. So let's take a very simple example or a very simple question that you might come across from judges, is that you had a period from 2019 to 2022 where you didn't have any competition, right? Most of the competitions went virtual. So during this period, there were people who came in, right? And what was what was the method that you used, or how was it that you ensured that you could retain people, right? Because one of the biggest motivations for anyone to be a part of these teams is to be at the competition, right? To compete amongst 50 to 60 different teams, to be amongst 3,000 students, and to stand out and win amongst them. So how did you motivate people to still work on the car, work on the designs with the same efficiency, with the same motivation, without going to the competition for 2 years or 2.5 years or something, right? So that's what we expect. Those are kind of questions you can expect from us, or we would expect to be answered when you talk about human resources. How do you recruit people? What's the criteria on which you uh, on which people join? Are there any tests, or are there any interviews, or whatever your procedure is to onboard people? How do you manage them? How do you keep them engaged always? is there some team building activity and those kind of things, which keeps every student involved, right? The leadership, of course, is always highly motivated, but it's about passing that on, or basically yeah, instilling that kind of a motivation into the rest of the team members. And how is that done? And how do you manage change? For example, like we had the pandemic, we moved from you know hanging out in the workshop from morning 9 to say 12 or 1 in the night, to actually sitting in our rooms and just discussing everything over Zoom calls or WhatsApp groups. So how was that taken care of? That you still moved on, but you still had the commitment and the efficiency. Maybe productivity a bit lower because, of course, everyone's not at in the workshop or something. But how do you manage such kind of things with respect to people, right? And as we all know, and we've heard a lot of the top judges like Claude or Pat Clark also mentioned this, that it's what a team is what wins the competition, right? The car is what just wins a few of the events uh, at the competition. So it's very much important for us to know how you are taking care of the team in that sense. And that's overall about what, yeah, human resource topic would entail. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Parth. The next question for you is, uh, does project timeline include the details of the current season of Spy EV that we are participating in,
Mhm.
or is it expected to have details till FB24?
So I think I answered this question at the start. The first question that I answered, it is best to probably have timelines till the competition that you want to visit, the first one, with the concept that you're presenting, so that we can also give you a feedback on how it looks, achievable or realistic, what can be the changes, suggestions from our end, so that the end goal of PyEV is to help you be a better team at Formula Bar 2024. So the longer the timeline that you present and the more details you show, the more feedback we can give as well. And yes, of course, it helps with the scoring and as well. But more importantly, yeah, we're here to help you. So if you share in more details, we can give you a better feedback.
All
Yeah.
right. And another question is the media presented parallel to the timeline enough, or do we need to include it as a separate section?
I would suggest to put it as a separate section. Hence, it has been mentioned separately in the rule book as well. So yeah, and the media is not just about your social media or something, but also about how you market your project, how you get sponsors, and it's very evident in teams across the globe, and especially India, right? If there's no money, then there's very less amount of performance that you can get. So it's more about knowing how you guys identify your sponsors, for example, keep them engaged. How do you seek sponsors? How do you onboard them? How do you manage sponsors, the relations with them? Do you do some kind of events and stuff like that? So it would be nice to know on how you guys yeah, approach this aspect of it, the non-engineering aspect of the engineering project that you guys want to carry out. So I would say do not just put it with the timeline, but yeah, you can show it on a separate basis. Yep.
Thanks, Parth. And the last question for you is, uh, for FSCV 2021, there was a detailed rubric for management report. For PI EV 22, we only have main points as a rubric, in which no subpoints are included for management strategy rubrics. So, is there any change in the rubric, or we can refer the rubric as provided?
You can refer to what was given in the last competition. Those documents remain, and they don't, how do you say, they still give a very fair idea of how things would work. But of course, there would be minor changes from our end as well, because we want to improve the entire experience of judging and have a much more fair criteria for scoring, etc. from our end, based on the feedback that we get from students as well as the judges internally, right? But yeah, and we this time we wanted to keep it a bit more. not, I wouldn't say ambiguous, but we wanted to let the students decide and just give them a few hints. That's where we did not give a very detailed rubric asking you the questions and then expecting answers. Because what we saw is that a lot of teams basically just answered questions like they do in an examination, and but didn't have really a lot of proof to show that they were doing those things, right? So we've kept it open ended this time. You can of course refer to that, but yeah, that's not the holy grail, I would say. So still, yeah, come up with your best ideas and put it forward, because the rubric that we used last time was just say a help sheet, I would say, but it wasn't everything. There was still a lot of things that teams presented which were beyond the rubric, and there was still a lot of teams that presented no having the rubric still presented less than what was expected from the rubric. So yeah, it's totally open to you guys from where you want to source your information.
All right. Thanks, Parth. Those were all the questions from the form.
Yeah.
Uh, to the students in the meeting, if you'll have any questions apart from these, you all can feel free to ask Parth now.
Guys, so just one thing, it's not only about the report for Pi EV, right? If you want to ask questions in general about team management and how to take your team forward, if you are a team leader right now, going to be the next team leader, etc., or even leading a subsystem or something, if there is any kind of clarifications you want to ask regarding how to run your team, you can ask those as well, and not just restricted to say the 10 pages of the competition that we have. So yeah, feel free to ask any kind of question. We have quite some good time.
Can you give some points from your experience that you faced while being the team leader or manager? That would be helpful for us.
Okay, so do you want the good examples or the bad examples? So the good stuff or the bad stuff that I went through and how we got out of it. So yeah.
Bad stuff would be a bit more helpful.
Okay, cool. Everyone loves the bad stuff. Okay, cool. So yeah, uh, I'll just give you a very short example of something that happened. So when I was leading the team, we decided to manufacture a monocoque back in 2018. And it was supposedly the first monocoque that we made as a team, and it took a lot of effort and everything, and we got it ready. So on the thing is, I remember the dates pretty much till today. So we were supposed to hit our first competition at FS East in Hungary in July, and that was July. Yeah, it was end of July was the competition, and July 10th was the date that we were flying out, and July 7th was the date that the car was flying out from Mumbai to yeah, Hungary. And on the 22nd of June, we were supposed on the 23rd of June we were supposed to have our rollout event. We were launching the vehicle and stuff. And on the 22nd of June, we had invited a celebrity who was going to be a part of this event next day. And it was going to be a big media fanfare where the celebrity was going to drive the vehicle and stuff like that, and then super reveal kind of thing. And on the night before the event, when we handed over the vehicle to the celebrity to just test and drive on the college campus, so that they don't stall the vehicle in front of the media, right? So yeah, the person simply drove straight into the wall, right, a head-on collision. And yeah, so of course there was no harm. The safety features that we have really worked. The impact attenuator crushed. The monocoque almost ripped off into pieces. And this is exactly as I mentioned, like 18 hours before we have a launch event and 15 days or something before we're sending out the vehicle, right? And it's not a space frame that you can just heat it or just cut everything and start welding the tubes again. It's basically a monocoque. And we sat, I think it was 9:30 or 10 in the night, and we really didn't know what to do. or we actually knew what to do, but we didn't know how to handle a situation where you cannot yell at a celebrity for yes, I am using a very nice word called messing up your entire competition, but I'm sure you know what the thoughts and words would have been in my mind at that time. So, and yeah, so there was one thing. There was one thing I learned on how to be super calm and cool in front of an external person. Right? You cannot have an outburst. That was one thing. So once we sorted that out, and this is where I'm actually really proud of what we pulled off. Right? We got together as a team. There were around 20-25 folks that day in the workshop. We just sat down. That time we didn't work on the car at all, right? We just let it be the way it was. We assembled, sorry, not assembled, sorry. We wrote down every single thing that had to be done. So the first thing we did was made a plan, right? And we had this approach, which was, say, the star-based approach, which is in any task that is given to you, identify or any project. First, put down the situation, which is your constraints, parameters, etc. Then you put down from that the tasks that you have, right? And then the actions that you remove from that, and lastly is, yeah, the rewards that you have at the end of it. But the main thing was we knew our situation, we knew the constraints, so we could not go back to our sponsors where we manufactured the monocoque. We also knew that we did have the raw material, but we knew the constraints basically that we cannot go back and remanufacture a new monocoque, right? So that was one of the biggest things, because we wouldn't be able to reach the sponsor's facility on time, etc., because it was out of town, and also we didn't have sufficient financial resources at that time to manufacture the monocoque all over again. Correct. And yeah, so that was the thing. But the one way we approached this was, then you go down back to first principles, and we sat down, tried to understand. Okay, there are cracks all over the monocoque, but how does carbon fiber or lamination work? Basically, it's that it needs a path to transfer load from A place to B place, right? And that's what fibers do, right? You have your fibers in a unidirectional or multidirectional, like say 90 degrees, 45 degrees, you know, whatever you are using. But the end thing that you have to do is just transfer load from one place to another place. And that's what like fibers do in composites. And that's what we ended up doing. So we reached out to a local workshop where they actually service Lamborghinis and Porsches, and these cars also have monocoques. So the first thing I tried to identify was which commercial vehicle has a monocoque, and it is these two that actually have monocoques for certain series. And then we reached out to the service center. We asked those guys on how they repair it, and they actually have this setup where they put infrared lights and stuff. Let's not go into the process, but we actually reached out. We almost onboarded a new sponsor within 48 hours, right? It wasn't really any sponsorship. We just wanted the facility without paying for it, naturally. And yeah, I would say that within 5 days, we turned it around. We knew what we had to do, of course. We just applied basic engineering principles, and then yeah, brought the car back to peace, and also did 2 days of testing, and then flew out to the competition. So we were supposed to do performance testing for exactly 10 days before leaving, which reduced to 2 days. But yeah, and at that point, the one of the only things we worried about, of course, the goal was to compete, etc. But one of the first goals was to complete technical inspection. So the success criteria, being from say top 5 in autocross, just went down all the way to clearing technical inspection and not getting caught for repairing a monocoque in the not most efficient or engineering way. And yeah, so this was one of the things, I think, probably one of the worst things that we went through as a team. But it wouldn't have been possible if the 15 to 20 people that worked on it wouldn't have been as highly and equally motivated as I was, or the rest of them was. And yeah, it was, for me personally as a team leader, it was beautiful to watch everyone work in sync and get things done. So yeah, that's one of the bad but good stories that I have. And yeah, so the thing is, this thing happened all over again. So at TU Berlin as well. So we are going to, so the team is going to their competition in USA, the Michigan one, now recently with their combustion car. And the car flew out on, I think, the 19th of April. But again, on the 13th of April, the car caught fire. So it was almost burnt. Like the rear wing was burned, the rear suspension was burned, and stuff like that. So it was a pretty nostalgic moment. And me being like, I'm not a part of the team actively, but the other thing was I still went down, right? So you still feel associated to the project. Though I'm working, I took time off on the weekend and went down to help with any possible rebuild that I could do, and manufacture any small component or just clean all the components that still can be used but have a lot of soot on them and those kind of things. But yeah, so it's usually how you keep your team involved, engaged, that, and based on that is how you can face such kind of situations and still turn around, and be better than what you actually planned for. That's, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Parth,
Yeah,
for that. There's a question for you in the chat box. It says, what does the communication section exactly mean? Is it communication between team members?
Yeah, so you have communication tools and you have directions for communication. If you, that's, those are two things, right? On how is information stored across the team, how is information passed, sorry, how is information stored within the team, how is information shared across the team. Do you have say a system like a team center where you have all your CAD files? Do you have a drive system, a cloud-based system? Is what is the general criteria on how information or knowledge is transferred? What communication channels you have, right? Yes, a lot of the teams have WhatsApp groups, but those are not the most organized form of communication, right? You can have Slack or Teams, depending on whatever tool you use. If you have WhatsApp also, it's not an issue, but if it needs to be in a very well organized way, for example. But yeah, mostly it's communication on how y'all, yeah, on a daily basis communicate with each other, manage your projects, manage your tasks via this communication, because 60% of the problems arise when you haven't communicated properly with the other person. So yeah, we just want to know how y'all talk to each other. That's it.
All right. The next question is, as we are going, I think he means they are transitioning into EV. This is the
From
first
fuel.
time we are working. This is the first time we are working on EV. So how should I lead the team? Because knowledge level is almost at the same level, and as I have to lead every department, so can't go in depth or every particular department. So unable to guide them exactly in the correct way. Please share your experience how to handle these things wisely.
So the first thing is, as a team leader, you wouldn't need to know it all, right? And that is the most important part. That is a very, very important part, is to identify people who are going to gain the knowledge in that respective department, right? And to, of course, for them to gain the knowledge, you need to give them the time as well, right? Everyone starts from a basic level, right? We all entered engineering with the minimal knowledge that we had, right, with respect to just physics, maths, and different stuff. And then we started building on upon it as we moved from one year of engineering to the next year, etc. But the thing would be, my suggestion would be to find the right people, right? To us, I think your major challenge would be from the shift from the C powertrain to the E powertrain, right? Because the other systems to a great extent are pretty similar. So I'm sure you have a knowledge base that's already developed for those systems. So let's talk about the E powertrain itself. And uh, the bigger things that we have, so you have controls, you have the motor, of course, the cooling is one part, the BMS and the accumulator, these 4 to 5 objects, I would say, being the main thing that compose of this system and will depend, define your performance or your output. So identify people who are going to be responsible for this, right? Give them the time, provide them the resources. So as a team leader, you're more of an enabler than just doing it everything by yourself, because that won't lead to success. Because tomorrow, if you go for 1 week for leave, so just you're going with family vacation, nothing will happen in the workshop, and that's not what you want, right? You want things to happen even when you're not there, right? And yeah, so you need to identify people who are going to take care of different things, give them the time, give them the resources, if it's books, if it's seminars, if it's connections to people in the industry, if it's sponsors. That is your responsibility to find and help them. Like, you cannot of course live up to every, say, request that they put forward, but of course you can always try to help them in achieving what is required, the base knowledge that has to be created in that sense. And there was way I try to follow this a lot. So with our electric vehicle program that we were running in parallel, so I think it was the first year for the FSEV back in 2018. And we had this group of electronics focused engineers who wanted to, so from the electronics team from the combustion vehicle, who wanted to take a deeper focus into working on the e-powertrain. And we had some new joinees as well. So my role was just to engage them, firstly, show them that okay, we are going to a competition, etc., so it gets them excited. Second was to provide them with as many resources as possible, the right departments in the university, across different universities, reaching out to, say, professors in other universities that are actually carrying out research, or help them with uh, getting in touch with industrial contacts, sending them out as much as possible to different conferences, different seminars, and exhibitions, so that they can just talk and gain knowledge or some connections. So that's all I majorly did. To be very honest, if you asked me details about the e-powertrain, I wouldn't be able to give you an answer on the technicalities, right? But if you ask me, as I explained right now, I can tell you how to go around with it, right? On what to approach first, and that's all I needed to know, right? And that's how I personally functioned and took care of it. And yeah, we are pretty much from our aspect, at least, pretty much happy with the results that we see, yeah, today as well, and we saw in the past. And one advice to all team leaders, be it EV or this thing, be it any, okay, we have only EV people out here, but even if you're running a project which is CV right now, is this was something that one of my seniors told me, is that the the day you do not actually have to work on the car yourself is the day you've become a successful leader, right? It's not about, and don't take this in the wrong way, that okay, because you're a team leader you don't work on the car. No, you work on the car. You always start with working on the vehicle, set the examples, lead by an example, set the tone of how things work, right? But you slowly need to start pulling yourself out of it as well. And that, why does that mark a mark as a true success of a leader, is because at that moment when you don't have to work on the car is when you have ensured every single person in your team knows what they're doing and knows what has to be done, right? And that is like the biggest achievement, rather than you working for 18 hours a day and getting the vehicle ready all by yourself. If your team knows what they need to do, right? If a person knows what he or she needs to do, then they don't need any other form of motivation and nothing else. And that's the sign of, I would say, successful leader slash leadership in that sense. But yeah, to answer your question, I would say just provide them with the right resources. Get hold of a group of core people, 4 or 5 people who are going to tackle this. Get yourself involved, yes, lead by example, but you cannot be the sole responsible for everything as well, right? You're a team manager, not the team by yourself. So you're just the manager of the team at the end.
Thanks, Parth. There is a question by Jabjot, but I think it is, I mean, I'll ask it nonetheless. It says, how did you manage handling the accumulator during building and testing phase, as it's a sensitive component to temperature?
Ooh,
Did
okay.
you I mean, did you allot certain members in a department or have an exclusive area for storing it, or both?
So I can talk about the exclusive area and about the people. So of course, you will have define ESOs well before your competition, so you know who is going to be your responsible for taking care of your accumulator, etc., and your powertrain. So, of course, and it's usually the people who designed it. So, if you are in the manufacturing and testing phase, you know surely who are the people who are going to handle it, right? And you know all of the safety procedures that need to be taken care of. So that's one thing about handling it. We really did not initially have a separate space, but yeah, we requested the college for a very small room that had an air conditioner to just store things, right? And but it's not really necessary. So that's what we did back in India. What we do or what we did in Germany was that we used to store it in the cellar, which is basically the underground level that we have, which is usually way cooler than whatever the atmospheric temperature is above, right? And it remains at a fixed thing. So even if temperatures outside are -1, -2, this place usually remain between 10 to 18 degrees Celsius, and even if it's super hot summer as well. So it was like a natural cooler, but that's the way we usually worked on the accumulator. But of course, it has to be prepared for the competition as well, to drive at a competition with 45 degree or 40 degrees Celsius or some 35 like Coimbatore. So yeah, so that I think is more from your technical aspect on how you're working on active cooling or those kind of things, or passive cooling is totally up to your cooling departments and your accumulator department's decisions. I wouldn't comment much on that.
All right. I guess those are the only questions in the chat box. Teams, if you all have any other questions, we have, say, 10
10
minutes
minutes.
more. Yes. If you all have any questions, you all can feel free to ask him.
Okay. Then I don't think there are any questions, right?
Doesn't look like it.
Unless someone is typing in the chat and it's a very long question. I hope if that's the case, then just read out a question. Yeah, then it's not the case. Cool.
All right. So then I will end the session. Okay, wait. There is a question for you. Will you share some ideas about how to manage deadlines?
Okay. The first part is about setting realistic deadlines. Then you manage them, right? So the best way to also then set deadlines is to always have the opinion and involve the people who are actually gonna be responsible to achieve them. So that's the first way on how you set deadlines, which are the more realistic, right? So you can always uh, I prefer starting from the end goal to the date that is there today, right? Because that's where I'm setting up the deadlines, right? So then you know, okay, I have a competition in 2024, January. I need to be in the testing phase by November, or sorry, sorry for that. I need to be in the testing phase by October or November 2023. For that, I need to start my manufacturing phase by, say, March 2023. And for that, I need to finish my designing by, sorry, yeah. So you get to know that you have to start your manufacturing, means you, of course, have to finish your designing by Feb. And that means I need to start with the final designs, iterations, etc., or start my design phase for the vehicle from August 2023, 22 or something, right? July, August 2022. So then you know these are your deadlines, right? And when you so you'd work from your deadlines from back from the competition to the date where you are, so you know where you have to have phases. And a good help for this is also like the submission deadlines we have for the documents as well. So you know, okay, I need my statics. I don't need to start working from probably from the start for the statics from today itself, right? For a competition in 2024 January. But maybe I have to start working on my statics in, say, 2023, mid 2023, because you have your EDR submission, your SES submission, or and then your cost report submission, etc., etc. So once that way, you start putting deadlines on what has to be done when, by when should this be done. So you have drop dead dates, and always plan for buffers, worst case situation. So I usually have two deadlines for everything. One is like a deadline, like just to achieve the task, and then one there is a drop dead date. Means by this date, kuch bhi karke it should be done, right? That's one date, and the other one is yes, we should do it, and there's always a small buffer between that. And this buffer is not to chill and enjoy that this date is so the actual date is the next one, it's after 1 week, there's 1 week buffer. This about 1 week buffer is when things go haywire. For example, when your vehicle catches fire or you drive it straight into the wall, right? So that's when these buffers come into play. For example, had we not kept buffers between testing the vehicle and sending it to the competition, we wouldn't have been able to repair it, right? So you keep these buffers as well in your deadlines. And now that you've worked your deadlines from, say, the end date to the start date, you work on the timelines from the start date to the end date. So now timelines are within these deadlines on what steps you're going to take. So you list down all the possible things that need to be done, that you know of, that need to be done, because that's also another problem, not knowing what has to be done. So you list down everything that you possibly know that has to be done, and then see what fits within the deadlines, and then you create a timeline on what, if things can be done in parallel, or they need to be done one after the other, or those kind of things. And then then you put forward a timeline on how things one after the other will build up, so that you finish everything within the deadline that you set earlier. And again, the thing is, you need to always continuously review them. So have weekly meetings to know the status of different sub projects or bigger projects, and keep reviewing them, because there's no harm in actually resetting your timeline, right? Deadlines need to be pretty much hard, but there's no harm in resetting it. But it's better to reset it 3 months before rather than 2 days before the deadline is there, or say something that you've set up, because then you're just panic reacting instead of planning stuff, right? So if you work in that way, I think it should be pretty much clear, and you should get a fair sense of where the project is heading to, and overall whether you're on time or not.
All right. Thanks, Part. And another question for you on YouTube. It says how to proceed with budget allocation when you have a budget crunch.
So, okay, if you were there from the start when we were talking about success criteria, right? When we spoke about success criteria, we started with competition goals, then the system goals, and so then when you have the competition goals in mind, you know that I need to achieve XYZ HP of power from or okay, now we're talking about electric vehicles, XYZ kilowatts, right? Or you want a kilowatt hour battery in that sense, and you want aero as well, and you want, say, still a 160 kilo car, etc. So you know what your priorities are, you know what is going to help you achieve your performance, right? And you then also know that if I sacrifice on A component over B component, my performance or my competition goals are going to go from, say, instead of achieving 650 points out of 1,000 at the competition, if I let go of if I choose A kind of cells over B kind of cells, this 650 becomes 450. Okay, so you know that, okay, you're going to lose 200 points in the competition, but you're going to save 5 lakh rupees. Simple example. The other one would be where so every single thing that where you're taking a decision comes with money and comes with performance, right? So you just weigh everything on the basis of money and performance. If you see a benefit, like, okay, spending, and but if you say you chose the B kind of cell, which saved you 5 lakh rupees, but you spend 2 lakh rupees on an aero package, which brings you back the 200 points of the competition, right? So it makes much more sense to allocate 2 lakhs to aero, put it on priority, instead of buying the more expensive cells that would have, cost you more amount of money and got you the same reward, right? So it's all about, to be very honest, cost to performance ratio and cost to performance reward. If you see that there is a benefit in doing it, right, and then you put money into it. And the other thing also is, what contradicts this is that you want to look at long-term benefits as well. maybe when you invested in the 5 lakh rupee cells instead of the cheaper ones, 5 lakh rupee more expensive cells instead of cheaper ones, and didn't do the aero package, maybe you were investing into something that was lasting for 2 or 3 years, right? Because you don't really change your cells every year, right? But you make a new aero package every year. So you need to see it on that sense as well, whether it's is it really an investment or it's an expense as well on what you're doing, right? So to be very honest, like cells or motors, these kind of things work for 2 to 3 years. So you should probably allocate a bit more amount of your budget towards in that direction, so that it takes off the load from the other, the coming teams, the coming seasons, to actually invest money in those. And then yes, you take the hit of, say, probably not having an aero package and not having, say, an active suspension or those kind of things. But because you made the more expensive choices for e-powertrain, the coming season is probably able to take the choice of, going for the aero or the active suspension. So you need to think from a 3-year perspective as well when you're allocating costs, but also important to see whether it is affecting your performance. If you don't spend that money, does it really affect your performance or not? One example from my year would be that we had to choose between uh, turbocharging the engine or not. And we saw that turbocharging a KTM engine didn't really bring a lot of difference in the performance at, say, Formula Bharat, which is not a very power heavy sort of circuit, right? The Formula Bharat track, it's not, there are not no huge long straights. And we saw the only benefit was that we would have scored more points in acceleration, which itself is just 75 points. But the hit would have been more on reliability, which matters in endurance, which is 325 points, right? And also with respect to the expense, so it would have cost us 2 spare engines plus the entire turbo kit, etc., which was around 2.5 lakh rupees. So it really didn't make a lot of sense to put money into that, and we did. So that's how we decided, and then we put that amount of money somewhere else, on researching for the next year. On Yeah, that's what we did at the end. We put the money on a research project for making our own brake discs instead of using. So that was something that was going to be used 2 years later on, but it was worth spending the money because today we do make our own brake discs, for example. So yeah, that's how you can always look at a project from performance as well as long-term investment perspective. Yep, that was the
Right.
answer.
And there's another question, and I think that should be our last one.
Okay.
It says, what would be a good buffer time to order for components that would need to be imported from your experience, as they might not be same as expected?
Uh, Considering the pandemic and the workload, etc., at customs, plus depends on where you are importing from, in the sense, which is the port of arrival. Like, is it Mumbai, or is it Chennai, or is it Delhi, or this thing? Depends. Like every customs house has a different speed, right? But I would always consider a minimum of 2 weeks as a buffer, minimum of 2 weeks, because papers get lost at these places, things get stuck up. And also 2 weeks, I would also consider cost, because if your anything you order spends 2 weeks at the customs warehouse, you get charged for it as well. So I would also consider a good amount of buffer for that. And yeah, consider 2 weeks as the worst case for getting your custom clearance. It might happen overnight and 2 days also, but the worst, it's better to run with a 2 week buffer. Yeah,
All
that
right.
was a good question for procurement strategy, but still it's fine.
All right. Thanks, Part. And okay, there's one more question. And guys, this will be the last question for now. It says how to manage stress within the team and how to do proper work distribution within team members.
So there are two approaches. Like, one would be like task-based approach rather than time-based approach. You cannot ask a person to just spend 8 hours in the workshop, but maybe he or she has nothing to do for 8 hours, right? So you always assign tasks to people. Of course, they have to be done within a certain amount of time, and that's how you probably want to balance it out between people. That okay, you don't just get all the menial tasks. Not everyone does. Not one, that okay, one person is just for the menial task. and one person's there for the designing task and one for this. So you distribute load, and the best way to do is not to have completely fixed roles. So in our team, the way we worked is during design phase, certain people had certain kind of roles. Of course, the leads, system leads, etc., usually remain where they are, but we had during the manufacturing phase, the roles used to change a bit for each team, etc., because you're focusing more towards manufacturing and those things. So everyone's contributing. So you have a slight shift in the dynamic. And during the testing phase, it changes as well. So, for example, our technical lead at that time, uh, he he during the design phase, he was mainly responsible for just communication between systems, not even vehicle integration or making the CAD in that sense, right? There was another person from the chassis team who was responsible for vehicle integration and ensuring that all the systems are the CAD ready and it fits, etc. The technical lead in the manufacturing phase shift to being the head of manufacturing, so coordination again for timelines, etc. And the person who was actually doing vehicle integration on CAD was now manufacturing the monocoque. So he went from, say, just doing a more of a managerial role to actually working completely hands-on in building something. And that ways, and later on, the same person was, because of the experience and knowledge, etc., was also the head of testing. So that ways you say you have lesser stress at some points, you have more stress at the other points, you have more responsibility, lesser responsibilities. And all of this was based on, say, uh, he or she had time to commit for with respect to exams, with respect to personal plans. A lot of people not only have to give university exams, but also say GRE, GMAT, etc., whatever they plan to give, CAT or even UPSC or exams or something, right? So you always need to ask people on what their availability commitment is, number of hours they can actually give, and then give them tasks that fit within that. And yeah, just of course ensure that everything's done as well, nothing's left out. But it's always good to ask people before just assigning tasks to them blindly, so they feel involved in the process. Maybe they still don't get the task that they wanted, but just because they felt involved, they'll still do it with good amount of commitment and won't feel completely stressed about it.
All right. Thank you, Parth. That brings us to the end of the session for today. Thank you so very much for making the time, Parth, and to all the students who have also made the time to be here. And thank you for all your questions. In case you'll have any further questions, feel free to write to us at formulabharat@gmail.com. We will try to answer most of your questions
Yeah.
henceforth.
And if you have any questions regarding, say, just team management in general perspective, you can always reach out to me on either LinkedIn, and then we can communicate further over email or something. Or yeah, so just feel free to reach out with these questions.
All right. Then thank you so much, guys. I will now end the session and all the best to you.
See you guys.